Welcome everyone. I hope you've had a good week and a good bank holiday weekend. I'm Sally Watson. I'm going to be facilitating this evening's session for the first half, and then I'll have to duck out early. I'm going to hand over to Roxeanne. I think I can see her there in the audience. So a bit of housekeeping first, and please keep yourselves on mute unless you're invited to speak. Please make full use of the chat, and you're welcome to pose questions there for speakers. If you don't want to raise your hand, we'll do our best to keep an eye on that. We can't always manage it, so just do stick your hand up if you feel you want to say something. Can you keep your questions and comments down to sort of a minute or less, so that we can make sure there's plenty of room for other people to join the discussion. And so welcome to anyone who's new to Ideas with Beers. For people who haven't joined us before, this is a forum for anyone interested in active travel, whether you're a campaigner, a practitioner, academic, journalist, politician, or just an interested person. And we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to present an idea. So you can get in touch with us via email, and we have now a really amazing website, thanks to Claire, and we'll put details of those in the chat. As I say, every week we've been sending out links using a spreadsheet. We've now changed to use Eventbrite, and it's not a perfect system, and we'll work to see what we can do to improve it. But in the meantime, if everybody can make sure that they have signed up via the website for Eventbrite, even if you have this link, because it will just mean that your name will be added to the spreadsheet, and next time around you will be sent the next lot of links, and then that will just happen automatically. You won't have to sign up again. If you want to take your name off, then get in touch and we'll take your name off the list. Tonight we have Bob Davis with our news update. And following that, we've got Llinos Brown, who is going to talk about the post-COVID transport impact report from the Institute of Transport Studies in Leeds. And then we've got Sarah Hughes from CamCycle, who's going to talk about their cargo bike scheme. So Bob, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, you haven't got host disabled participant screen sharing.
No, I've just switched it on, Bob. Sorry, you beat me to it.
Okay, there you go. Right. Okay, so transport in the time of COVID-19, 5th of May update. Right. Don't forget to write to me there if you've got special information you want to refer to, or if you have queries about previous editions. Don't forget our address there, where you can pick up all the previous editions, slideshows, and also YouTube. YouTube normally takes about a week or so to get up. This is my favorite. I keep on, for the time being, I'm going to be doing slides from the war, showing the resilience of active travel. That's a new one. Another new one there. And you can download that from that website. Don't forget the local authority toolkit. Adam Reynolds said there were a couple of things new in it, with more pressure for cycling and walking plans to be area wide or local authority wide. I couldn't actually see that. I don't know if Adam wants to say anything about that. If he's here today, if he could say that at the end of the presentation. Right, this is new. Here's a story. You can click on it there. It's not actually a new study. It's an extensive collection of reliable information and DEFRA approved data that the Central Office of Public Interest carried out, then mapped and supplied to the Imperial College modelling team, so they could align the levels in the model to these real world levels in every UK town and city. So read the article, and you can go onto that website. And what's really interesting is how there's poor air quality just about everywhere, apart from in most of the southwest, Wales, the north of England and Scotland. But it does show it's not just the urban metropolises and the whole London area. It actually goes out into sort of all of the home counties, for example. So not an actual new study, but it's enables people to go to where you live and see your score. Okay, local elections on Thursday. You should have already gone onto the Cycling UK page if you're not inside London, living streets as well. There's the LCC one. Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea are a good example of local campaigners. And we shall see what happens. Okay, the reading list. This is a new one here. This is from We Are Possible, and it shows how motor vehicular traffic is responsible for holding up emergency vehicles, not LTNs. They did that report and didn't get much coverage from the mainstream media. So you should have a look at that, and you can use it in discussions, campaigning for the local elections and elsewhere. Yeah, there's the Secretary of State gave a lot of oral evidence to the Transport Committee the other day. And I have to say, didn't really say much about active travel, except saying, oh, you know, it's going to be better, more people are going to be walking and cycling. That's about it. Lots of other stuff about aviation and P&O and so on and so on. So it's really a long report to see more or less nothing on active travel. Okay, again on the reading list. Very interesting story by Ross Lydall from Enfield. There's been a success story of the Fox Lane LTN, but he claims that Labour doesn't want to talk about it too much. They're a bit embarrassed by it. They're worried that it might bring the antis out. Here are the two stories about one from The Guardian and one from Channel 4 News about that poor air quality report that I mentioned just before. Here's something from Sport England, reported in The Guardian. The number of inactive adults in England rises by 1.3 million since COVID. There's the story of the bike storage I mentioned last week. And also this is important about how a lot of Tories are actually, or Tory supporters are keen to support net zero, despite what you might hear. Yes, on the Active Travel Fund allocations, we should know after the new local authorities are in place. So let's see if hopefully that'll be in time for the next week's edition, or it might just be coming through then. Oh yeah, again, there's some more stuff still coming up about Leith Walk. It does look not good at all. Right, this is from We Are Possible again. Just 10% of London residents are responsible for half of its car trips. So there's some good data there from We Are Possible. Do go to their website. That's London, of course. And also the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. There's a 6-week period when the cycle lane here in central London is due to be closed off, 3rd of May to mid-June. That's not very nice. The Queen is a patron of Cycling UK, by the way. So that's not very nice in London. Don't know what's going to happen about that. There's the report I mentioned last week about the relative cost of getting a place in a cycle hangar compared to the cost of parking a car. Mentioned that already. This is new. Hammersmith and Fulham. One's gone in on Uxbridge Road. Here's that report again I mentioned last week about local elections. It applies in London, suggesting that people aren't really worried one way or another about LTNs and cycle lanes. But I don't know that. I don't know if we'll learn anything more from the elections. If there'll be any kind of post-election studies saying that people voted the way they did because of LTNs or cycle lanes. We don't know. Oh yes, now this happens to be from the campaigners in Havering, but what it is I don't know if Simon Monk's here, but there's a tool that can be used to revisualize streets. So on the left is as it is, and on the right is how it might be. And this enables you to play around and come up with a nice image of how things could be different. And that's pretty much it. Just another photo of Brian from last week because it shows him being wet after riding through a fountain in Munich. And that is it. So I don't know if anybody has anything to say on that, whether Adam Reynolds wants to say anything about that toolkit, or Simon wants to say anything about London. Or what does Ruth want to say?
Ruth, do you want to?
Oh, just read the toolkit. So Hounslow have been very proactive with this, and they've come up with some really exciting examples, and the kit for designing the roads, and the local onesies, as we call them, have taken them as gospel. And they're up in arms that the evil cycling lobby, including cycling, what's they called? London Cycling Campaign, are running London, and they're going to destroy Chiswick even more than we already have. So it is quite funny that they've picked them up and really think that we are going to do it. It'd be quite nice if we did.
Does anybody know what the name is of those?
Better, BETA.
Oh yes, BETA, yeah.
But it finishes on Thursday, the free trial. Need to be aware of that. So you have to get your ideas in now because it was something free till the election.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No.
No. Wow.
Yes.
Oh.
Who says
Yes,
yes?
sorry, I'm trying to unmute.
Robin, is that Robin?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
Robin.
go for it.
My video on. No. Sorry, I'm on the mobile today, and
That's okay. We can hear you fine.
good. So last week, start video. There we go. Last week we had the COSAT conference. COSAT is the Coalition of Healthy Streets and Active Travel in Oxfordshire, and that was Monday lunchtime. I don't know if anyone made it along, but we have videoed that, and that is now on the website. So in a minute I will log in on my computer instead of my phone and drop the link in for that. Our theme was healthy and inclusive spaces. So we talked about low traffic neighbourhoods where we produce a residence guide. I'll come back to that in a second. 15-minute neighbourhoods and school streets. So the residence guide is a we looked at what the residents of potential LTNs were seeing, and it was typically either stuff from the council, kind of consultation notices, or ETRO notices, which were very technical and jargony. And sometimes they were getting anti-LTN pamphlets, which were not very well evidenced or even truthful. So we thought we'd design something a bit friendlier and helpful and evidence-based. And I think what we came up with was quite good. And there's a link to that, and I recommend that as might be useful for other groups with. It's probably, we took the view it was too late on LTNs that have already gone in and people have firmed up their opinions, but where they are coming, it may be a good thing. So I'll drop a link into that and to the evidence page we developed to go along with it. which I think are all quite good things. So look out for those 3 links in all coming into the chat in a couple of minutes' time.
Thanks, Robin. That's really
I can
fantastic.
do a little talk on that in a I don't know, next week or something like that if you want.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, if you want to send us an email, then yeah, we'll see if we can get you a slot. It would be good to hear more about that.
Okay.
Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, very similar actually. So some time ago, I went to a workshop by the City of London on the City of London Street Accessibility Tool, which is trying to balance the different needs of different accessibility groups. So that'd be walking, cycling, disabled people of different sorts, and it's now published. I'm just looking at it. It says it was actually developed by Urban Movements, so there's another call out for them. And that is now available on their website, and I'll try and put the link in the chat.
Yeah,
It is biased.
up.
It is biased because it's the City of London, so there's things they don't look at things like broken paving slabs and so on because there aren't any.
Thanks, Mark. Well, yeah, and perhaps Bob, you might want to put those in your news update for next week, and then people have the links. If you want to both put those in the chat, that would be great. Right, if there's no more questions or comments, we'll move on to our first speaker. Llinos Brown, is that, I don't know, is that how you pronounce your name?
No, that's really good. Yeah, it's a Welsh one, so
yeah, it's tricky for me. So welcome. Llinos is going to talk to us about the Institute of Transport Studies Leeds post-COVID transport impact report. And are you able to, I presume you've got slides?
Yeah, I'll just share the screen now and see how we get on.
Yeah. Great, that's great.
Perfect. Let me put it on presenter. There you go. Can you see the right view? You can't see the note.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. That's it. So hi everybody. Thanks very much for inviting me to talk this evening. I believe that the Transas work has sort of been mentioned in some of the sort of reading lists. So hello from the Transas team, because I don't think any of us have spoken here before. So thank you very much. What I'm going to do today, the Transas work is quite a big body of work, so I'm trying to sort of narrow it down and hoping that if I just give you an idea of the data that we're collecting, it can then stimulate some thoughts and some ideas and questions. And if there's anyone that doesn't want to embrace the sort of hands up or the Q&A, feel free to drop me an email, because I'm happy to sort of talk more about this at a later date. But just to start with, I wanted just to show the sort of main data collection points that we've done in the Transas work. So I know there's a lot on this slide, but across this top is the longitudinal panel survey that we are doing. And what that is it's a multi-wave panel survey with various sort of time points. We've done 3 surveys up until last year, and we've got another survey going out now in June. And when we first approached participants in July 2020, we asked them about the time point, that particular time point, and also what they were doing pre-pandemic, because it was still at the forefront of people's minds. And we went back to the same people in December, and then we went back to them again in July. So this enables us to track sort of behaviours over time and see what's changing, and try and examine whether, you know, changes in maybe kind of walking levels or car use, how that's sort of corresponding with maybe work levels and shopping. The survey does have a bit of an urban bias. It is focused around 10 city regions of the UK, which is listed in that bottom corner. But as I sort of mentioned briefly then, the survey covers all different sort of topics really. So we've got things such as what transport modes people are using, the frequency they're using them, what their work status is, shopping and leisure activities, how people get to school if they've got children, all of these different things, along with some attitudinal questions as well. So it's a really detailed sort of source of data that we've got. And alongside that, we've also done some sort of public and policy interviews. So the policy interviews are kind of continuing at similar sort of time points to the survey. And then last year, we also did some public interviews, and these were in-depth qualitative interviews, about an hour in length in each one. And we went back and re-interviewed people again. And that was really, really helpful for us to get an understanding of what was going on during the pandemic and help us sort of interpret the survey results. So to date, we've written up until to this point, we've got 3 sort of reports out. They're available on the website. And the most recent one was the Less is More, Change in Travel in the Post-Pandemic Society, which was published in March this year. And I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that why we called it Less is More, really. Our results have shown that we're able to adapt significant parts of our life and do a lot of what we need to do by actually traveling less. And that's, we think, is like really important because this long established link of economic growth and increased mobility has basically sort of been broken. But it is important to note that none of the positive changes that we've identified and that we've seen in our work, which I'll talk about some of those in a little bit more in a few moments, none of it should be taken for granted. We still need to kind of have policy changes, encouragements, prompts for people, changes in infrastructure to kind of encourage people to continue with what they're doing. We all know that less motorised travel can mean more and quicker progress to decarbonisation and better well-being. And to meet our climate obligations, it's clear that we need to sort of travel less by car. And as we come out of the pandemic more now, there's like a real chance to sort of plan differently for transport and to encourage, where possible, kind of fewer trips or fewer motorised trips, greater blend of virtual activities and more localised and more active travel. So I'm just going to pull out 2 key findings, which I thought this sort of group might be interested in. And the first is about going against this maybe sort of the popular perception at the moment that car traffic is back to normal. It isn't back to normal. It's not back to pre-pandemic levels, and it's not exceeded these figures, which I think goes against the kind of grain that I'm hearing a lot of anyway. So this graph shows each transport mode used at least 3 days a week in June 2021 as a proportion of what was going on pre-COVID levels. So a figure of 100% would imply that the amount of people using that mode of transport at least 3 days a week is the same as pre-pandemic levels. And as you can see here, in the summer last year, regular car use was back to 85% of its pre-pandemic level. And the only form of transport that we can see which has seen an increase in the amount of people doing it is walking, which I'll come on to in a few slides. And our data reflects the national transport figures. So the graph with the wiggly line is from the DFT, and that goes through the whole of the pandemic sort of time point. And it basically shows, again, that the weekend and weekday car travel figures. And again, if it was back to normal, it would be 100% all the time. We can see that weekends on average, end of last year, they were sort of going above pre-pandemic levels, but weekday car travel was about, on average, 85%. And I had a look just before this meeting, realizing my graph wasn't up to date, and had a look at April. And you can see in the text boxes on the left-hand side, again, car travel isn't back to normal. And this is a really big deal. Well, we think it is, that never would we have sort of believed pre-pandemic that car traffic or car travel being 10% less than what it was, and still business sort of continuing as usual, and GDP being at the rates that it was pre-pandemic would ever happen. So this is kind of, we think, like really, a really good point. But moving on to walking, which is something that we're not seeing being reported in many places, and I'd be really interested in hearing from the group whether you're seeing sort of figures like this. But as I sort of showed before, when we look at walking as a proportion of the same measure pre-COVID, walking in June was 159% of pre-pandemic levels. So that's a lot more people walking regularly. And when we look at sort of the time points, our data shows that 58% of people were walking 3 days a week or more in summer 2020, compared to just 36% pre-pandemic. That's not shown on these graphs. That's just, I didn't want to bombard you all with too many graphs. But the top figure on this, this slide shows the proportion of journeys that involve walking. So when we look at all the different kind of modes of travel, or the kind of transport interactions that people have reported in the surveys, we can see that that has increased over time. But we did see a little bit of a drop in June 2020, but it was still twice what it was pre-pandemic. And figure 10, which is the bottom figure on this sort of page, shows what people have been walking for. And that's the mean days per week for each journey purpose. And we can see that people are walking for all different things. This idea that people were, mostly walking for leisure during the pandemic. Yes, we can see people have just been, going for a walk and for leisure purposes, but they've also been walking more for grocery shopping, sort of traveling to work, visiting friends and family. So this sort of less motorized travel has been accompanied by more walking. And I've currently just been doing some work on sort of looking at this sort of walking frequency a little bit more, and looking at these different, who is walking more, who is walking less, and trying to see if there's, looking at different demographic groups, whether car ownership mattered, even looking at whether someone had a dog had made a difference. And currently I haven't found any statistically significant differences between these. So it seems to be kind of across all groups. So it brings us sort of last couple of slides, just kind of thinking about what the future will hold. And this is, again, I've just sort of pulled some ideas together here. And we can see that I think it's important to realise that the pandemic can't be unlearned. It's something that has changed how we do things, and it's going to continue changing this. Yes, we all see reports about returning to the office, people not using public transport, but there's going to be, we're kind of thinking it as a future blend. There's going to be a blend of what people are doing in the future, which has been impacted by the pandemic. And that relates to everything from kind of what I've sort of put a few ideas on this slide with, about working, business travel, whether people are going to actually want to travel at the other end of the country just for an hour meeting when they could do it online. I think that's highly unlikely now. But there will be some changes that will stick. And, people have also adapted their lifestyles, childcare routines, spaces in houses. We can also see kind of when people have got rid of a car, they reported that some of those factors were due to the pandemic. So it's quite complex what's sort of going on, but there has been a change, and that will impact what's going to happen for going forward for the road to decarbonisation. So penultimate slide, sorry, I know this is jumping around a little bit, but just wanted to kind of put this out there. Just focusing on working from home, we did some sort of, we wanted to look at what the impact of working from home would have on travel and the future of travel, because lots of people kind of talk about the commute. And what we did was use the data on the number of days worked, the proportion of days worked from home before COVID-19 and again in June 2021, the main mode used and the distance, and we calculated the commuter trips and the mileage that would be potentially be saved if half the level of working from home that was being undertaken in June 2020 was maintained. And that led to a 16% reduction in car commute miles, which it doesn't sound a lot, but that would have a significant impact on total traffic levels, as commuting corresponds to around 20% of all car mileage. And I imagine it would have sort of an impact on the kind of air quality as well. But these impacts on the peak period, well, the commuter travel also, it doesn't just reduce car travel, it does actually reduce other aspects like public transport. And that's where we can see that, the public transport element can be significantly impacted there. So this is the last slide, sort of speeding through all these. We kind of came up with some sort of areas for action, and highlighting this need that public transport is kind of at this sort of critical point at the moment, where it's been heavily subsidized during COVID, but now it's kind of, it's very clear that subsidizing is kind of going to be stopping, or the money is not going to be flowing as much as it was. So we've sort of called for an action to stimulate public transport sort of now. We've also said that we've also recommended an active sort of managed return to the office to kickstart more sustainable commuting. People who have been working from home have maybe changed their priorities, adjusted their lifestyles. Their commute could change as well, but without somebody maybe helping them or prompting them, it's maybe people might struggle to kind of know what their commuting options are. We've also said to prioritise improving pedestrian environments. Walking has increased a lot, and this is something that we could just throw some encouragements there to kind of aid this sort of continuation. We've also said encourage leisure cyclists to broaden their cycle use. During the pandemic, we can see that loads more people have cycled, and that's been widely reported. In our data, we haven't seen that that's turned into regular cycle use. But there's still an opportunity there. There's lots of people that have not cycled before, or not cycled for a very, very long time, and they started cycling, and our interviews tell us that they really enjoyed it. So it's a big ask to get someone to go from occasionally cycling around the park to then start commuting. So sort of encourage cyclists at sort of different levels to broaden how they're using their bikes. Tackle the rise in light good vehicles. Haven't mentioned it here, but the traffic data shows that light good vehicles and HGVs is a lot more than what it was pre-pandemic, which maybe gives this perception that traffic is back to normal. And then support a shift to sort of lower car ownership. And there's a few other recommendations, but I know I'm kind of over time, so I think I'll leave it there and take some questions.
Thank you. That was a really fantastic presentation. Really interesting to see those statistics and what's changed and what's stayed the same. And I think you were saying about that kind of decoupling from driving from the economy is really, really significant. I don't know how we kind of amplify that message, because that's the basis on which a lot of schemes are funded at the minute, and obviously it's not necessarily the case. Now we can sort of demonstrate that it's not necessarily the case. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I think my first one would be, in your kind of suggested actions, you talk about improving pedestrian environments, but only encouraging more cycling. And I suppose given that people cycled more, partly I imagine because there was very little traffic in that first lockdown and over that first year of COVID, and we know that people won't cycle if there is a lot of traffic, and although traffic levels are lower than they were, they're way higher than most people would want to comfortably cycle in. So I just wondered why it's only encourage cyclists and not prioritize improving cycling environments in the same way as pedestrians.
I think that's a great question, and it's something we did think about when we were writing this, and I think it just boils down to the fact that changing infrastructure in terms of cycle lanes and making decent quality cycle lanes, not just throwing some cones out, and making connected infrastructure that works, takes a lot of time. And when you look at the need to decarbonize very quickly, there's a time element there when you kind of have to go through the policy processes and the planning processes in terms of cycle lanes that just takes a long time at the moment. And one of the discussions we had was kind of some of the improvements to walking could be done a lot faster. So it's not a need that there isn't, it's not us saying that the cycling doesn't need to happen, cycling improvements, but it's just a sort of time element there. And also in terms of our work, we haven't seen that in terms of increase in cycling compared to walking, we haven't seen that massive jump. Yes, we've got lots more leisure cyclists, but it's a big jump from someone, and this is what the qualitative interviews told us, it's a big jump from somebody that's cycled a bit more during the pandemic to then start doing their grocery shopping or start commuting to work. That's a massive, huge step, which doesn't just, it's not simply get some more infrastructure. There needs to be other things there when we've got loads of people already walking loads. So we don't need to encourage them to walk more. We maybe need to encourage them to maybe walk to different places or to do different things where they're walking.
Thanks. Right. Who else has got a question? I think Martin, you've got your hand up.
Thanks. Thanks. That was a really good, really interesting presentation. I'm interested in the fact that you were talking a lot about sort of daytime, weekday and weekend use, but a lot of our transport planning is based purely around a peak hour at either end of the day. So much transport modelling is all about the peak, and particularly when it comes to things like junction capacity, which often then squeezes out active travel infrastructure, because we demand the capacity to deal with that hour's peak. I wonder if you found any sort of good news on that front in terms of peak spreading, or in terms of whether there's any information on the changes in peak travel as opposed to overall daytime travel.
Yeah, so unfortunately that's not something we really capture in the surveys. So in the surveys we ask people just about how frequently they do each mode. So rather than kind of when they're kind of when they're doing it. But I know that is something that we've been at various sort of forums discussing some of this work with the DFT as well, and it's something that I think is becoming more on the agenda now, in terms of the peak. What is the peak now? It's definitely not Monday to Friday, in those morning hours. I think there's a different picture going on in terms of the peak in London than there is in the rest of the country as well, and there's different things going on there. But unfortunately it's not something that we've managed to cover in our work, but it is something that's on our radars to try and see if there's other people doing it and kind of connect the dots a bit more.
Thanks.
Dave, I can see you've got your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Let's go for it. Unmute. Is it working okay? I'd actually like to follow through with Martin's thing as well, that how the traffic has been skewed. I'm a bit of a vampire when I do my driving. I only drive after 11 o'clock at night until about 3 o'clock in the morning. And with so many of the haulage companies in Scotland now using trains for about 80% of their ton miles, night trunk traffic on the motorway has fallen off a cliff. The motorways are deserted at night. I'm wondering whether the sort of changes in commuter use of cars are still filling up the roads at the same time, perhaps for a shorter length of time, and then the roads are deserted out with those times because nobody's using the cars. So has that skewed it? And you mentioned light commercials. Do you mean light goods vehicles? Do you mean light commercial vehicles like small vans and the sort of parcels delivery vans that are going around? Because a lot more online ordering. Or are you referring to the larger vehicles, the 18 and 26 tonners?
So that's based on the, I think it's Highway England have got some really clear definitions of what they class as light goods vehicles and HGVs. Light good vehicles do sort of class, as far as I'm aware off the top of my head, it's the sort of the vans and the sort of the smaller.
7.5 tonners an HGV, 3.5 tonners a light commercial. But what's very interesting is to look at the way over the past decade, because of online business and deliveries like so forth, the sales of vans and light commercials are going at 3 or 4 times, rising at 3 or 4 times the rate of car sales. HGVs and buses are pretty much static in basically renewing the fleet, but these small vans are just burgeoning onto the streets. What I have noticed, we now have 2 cycle logistics companies in Glasgow, and they're both contracted to one of 2 of the mainstream blue chips. So one's delivering Yodel parcels and the other one's delivering FedEx, which is very interesting. I don't know whether that's a sort of area that you're seeing local deliveries by cargo bike.
It's not something that we've looked at directly in this work about sort of deliveries, but it is something we're trying to again, our data, we've got information on how people are shopping and how they're conducting their grocery shopping as well as their sort of leisure shopping. So we've got an idea of what's sort of happening, but we're really interested in kind of connecting these dots with, you know, how are deliveries working and what's this wider impact of this increase in deliveries, because we know there's been an increase in deliveries, but if it is this better or worse in terms of wider decarbonisation, obviously that's a very complex thing to have a look at. But we are sort of, again, I don't have a direct answer for you for this, unfortunately, but it is something we're looking at and trying to find other people that, you know, looking into this, because the big question is what's being delivered is impact.
Also how it's being delivered, because Amazon in Glasgow had a really embarrassing situation. They bought a fantastic number of electric vans and they couldn't charge them.
Thanks, Dave. That was a good question. Zach, have you got a question? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, I double clicked. Thanks for the presentation on this. Yeah. So I just comment, like, I'm a traffic engineer, and in the course of my job, I have to commission traffic surveys. And basically, it's what we've been looking at. I've done quite a few times now. It's like looking how, I suppose, representative the traffic surveys have been of previous years, so that we can model into the future as well and like apply some growth factors. And I'm quite glad and reassured to find that you have very broadly similar findings to what we've had. That like generally the peaks are down, but what we've found is that traffic off peak has increased. So it does seem to be less commuting overall, and particularly on Mondays and Fridays. Like before, we wouldn't use them as representative weekdays, but it's even more so now that the peaks completely, like the traffic flow profile through the day is completely different. And I think Martin partly answers your question as well. Perhaps I think was something you'd asked about, but we've not really looked too much at modal shift. But one of the projects where we did do that on, it was the decrease in cars relative to LGVs was quite like significant, really.
Zach, I was just wondering, do you look at any sort of walking in terms of that, or is it mostly sort of motorised vehicles?
Yeah, so I work mostly in signals, but it's also like cycle design and bus infrastructure as well. But we do consider walking surveys sometimes, but often it's like I work for a consultancy and the council's often only paying for the traffic surveys, but always when we do site visits, we'll always be like counting pedestrians. And it's a big bugbear of mine really is that we've had to fight for pedestrian crossings quite a few times because we've seen people crossing there with like, you know, prams trying to get across a dual carriageway. But people say like, there's no one walking there. You're like, well, there isn't a crossing. You wouldn't, you know, justify a bridge by the amount of people swimming across the river. And it's, yeah, walking surveys, in my opinion, often aren't representative because of that, and needs to be taken with a pinch of salt.
Thanks, Zach. That's something that we're finding at the moment, with which we're trying to like validate our data. And when we look at all the data sources that look at walking, they're maybe using walking counters, which, oh, guess what? During the pandemic, people weren't walking in the city centre where the counters were. So the walking levels were not going to be reported. They weren't going out and counting people walking, or they were counting in, you know, people that are working from home and were walking in their local areas. That's not where the people were counting. So it's there's definitely a dilemma here and a wider discussion point about how we factor in and count walking to make, you know, the figures stand out a bit more.
Yeah, I'm aware that someone used like a similar technique to what the propensity to cycle tool did for cyclists to investigate what uplift in terms of like the percentage of commuters existing could be moved into walking, and then use that to plot down onto routes as a way to try and get some sort of idea of levels.
Thanks, Zach. Claire, have you got a question?
Yeah, thank you. Really interesting. My question is sort of like a statement. I'm wondering if you can like say if you think it's right and what the implications would be, which is, it seems like all the evidence that you've shared, and you sort of touched on it in your last answer, shows that there's now, you know, much more evidence that people are spending more time in their local neighborhoods, partly because of the, you know, the fact that working patterns have changed, but not just. So am I right that the evidence supports that people spending more time in their local neighborhoods? And if that's right, I sort of feel like we need to get that message out there more, because that affects investment in local neighbourhoods in terms of facilities and amenities more than in, say, city centres. And also it also supports effectively the journeys of people, like, to generalise, single mums, you know, not commuters basically. So yeah, does this support the more investment in neighbourhoods?
Great question. It's on our agenda to look out for the next survey wave, because we do have, we were lucky enough for a lot of people to share their postcodes with us. So something we're looking at for the next wave of surveys, now that we've got this sort of post-pandemic sort of situation that we're in, where are people walking more, and then trying to tally up kind of, you know, what are the key points or key characteristics of a particular area, and where are we seeing increase in walking and decreases in walking, or levels that are not as high as other places. But the data, we can see that people are walking. We can see that there's, sorry, get the words out right. In summer last year, we could see that 50% of the people working in our survey were working from home some of the time. So when we look at those that are kind of increasing their walking, we can see that, you know, some of those are walking from home. So we haven't got, you know, we don't actually know where they're walking, but when we look at what are the distances to their shops that they're going to, that they've reported, how frequently they're walking, it kind of implies that there is people walking in their local area a bit more. And from the interviews that we were doing, you could see that people that were working from home more were walking more in their local area, doing those little shops, you know, the little sort of top-up shops, doing that a lot more for walking. But I'm not sure if our data really shows that yet, but it's something that we're going to be looking at for the next data, and we've got some other people kind of coming on for the analysis for that, so we should be able to get to the nitty-gritty of that a little bit more.
Thank you. And Mark, you've got your hand up. Are you there? But no camera on. Or yep.
Me, sorry, Matt. This is feeling very temperamental at the moment. Just wondering about the active live survey they're doing, which measures walking frequency, and for walking for utility and walking. Is there any overlap with that? Because obviously that's very useful and very quite detailed. I mean, it only goes down to council level, not locality level, but surely it can corroborate some of the data you've got for those councils you've been doing your more detailed surveys on.
Yeah, that's funny you should ask that, because I've been, the end of last week I was looking at the active live survey and just trying to work out how our data fits in with that. And the point where we're at the moment, I'd say that it's the amount of walking, the frequency walking that we're finding in our survey does correspond more with their active live survey, but then it seems to slightly contradict some of the DFT data, which says that theirs is also based on some of the active lives. So I have put a freedom of information request in to try and find out what's going on in those sort of January and February months just before the pandemic, so we can try and sort of see where our data fits in with some of these other ones. But I think I hadn't actually thought about looking at the active live survey and pinpointing that down to sort of local authority level, and then we might be able to connect that again with some of the postcode data, which would probably be an interesting bit of analysis. So.
Well, there was an analysis which Bob mentioned last week about plotting it against income levels. Is it Will Petty did the research plotting it against that, so he might be worth talking to. It's on Bob's slides last week.
I'll check them out. Thank you.
So we need to move on now, but there's lots of more questions and comments in the chat. So Llinos, I don't know if you've got time to have a look through, but there's somebody who's asked, and we can kind of perhaps really quickly cover some of these now. Somebody's asked to know what reliably increases public transport use. Somebody has asked about where she might find data on the increase in HGV and LGV traffic. And there's a few comments, people asking what it is that were pedestrian changes that would be quicker and easier to put in than say, for example, modal filters for cycling, or some of the temporary infrastructure that's gone in very quickly in places like London.
So I'll put up a link to the HGV and the LGV statistics because that's freely available from the DFT. It's quite a big spreadsheet, and you just need to sort of make a graph of it and it'll make more sense. So I'll put a link up in the chat for that. You'll have to repeat the first question, but in terms of the walk-in elements, I think there's some elements such as prioritising not parking on pavements, which don't require any infrastructure changes. There's things such as not having dropped curbs in suitable locations or having pavements that have got that are not well lit or are just overgrown, you know, and these were things that came up in our surveys in the interviews that we did last year. We talked about walking and what could be done to encourage people to walk more. And that's what I meant in terms of some of the infrastructure changes, a bit more of an easier fix in terms of cutting hedges back properly, maybe fixing some street lights, dropping some curbs, making it accessible to all, you know, improving the paving slabs that somebody mentioned before. These are things that don't require planning changes, which I think to do cycle infrastructure properly require potentially some sort of, you know, the planning policies that we have at the moment require some changes to implement them properly when some walking things, you know, can be changed a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the other one was about increasing public transport, how to reliably increase public transport use.
I think public transport use, that's, I don't know the answer to that. It's something that we're kind of thinking about a lot, and it's something that's coming up in the policy interviews that we've got at the moment. There's definitely a lot of potential that, you know, we can see that in the public transport figures that peak travel and the sort of Monday to Friday travel, commuter travel isn't coming back, but weekend travel is bouncing back. Yet the question is, when do the trains do all their sort of repair work? When's the biggest disruption? It's on weekends. So until we start changing this kind of, you know, people are willing to go back on weekends to be using public transport, you know, that's just trade as an example. We can kind of see it a bit more on buses. So leisure travel is where people are using it, and it's maybe remarketing it to this, you know, in a different way rather than it being about the commuter travel, because commuting journeys aren't what everyone travels for. There's loads of other journeys that people just don't seem to get the headlines.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about it. We'll have to go and read the report in a bit more detail now. So our next speaker is Sarah Hughes. Are you there, Sarah?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi. Who's going to talk about the cargo bike scheme in Cambridge, CamCycle's cargo bike scheme. Are you able to share?
Yeah, I'll just get that going. Hang on a minute. Right, how's that looking?
Great.
Super. So as Sally said, I'm here to talk about CamCycle's project to promote cargo bikes. So I worked on this project as a paid intern at CamCycle between October last year and March this year. My role finished in March, but some work at CamCycle is still ongoing to complete the project. So I thought I'd set the scene with this lovely cargo bike picture, which was taken by one of CamCycle's volunteer photographers during a photo shoot which kickstarted our Love Cargo Bikes social media campaign, which was part of the project. Many of you are familiar with CamCycle, but for those of you who aren't, CamCycle is the Cambridge cycling campaign. The charity has worked for more, better and safer cycling in Cambridge since 1995. CamCycle offers a paid internship every year, and it's an amazing opportunity for someone to get an insight into the world of cycling advocacy and the workings of an active travel charity. I was really lucky to have been offered the internship and have very much benefited from it. So in terms of the project to promote cargo bikes, CamCycle was producing the material for Cambridgeshire County Council, who required this work to be completed as they're a lead partner in something called the City Changer Cargo Bike Project. And that's a project funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme. And the project aims to see people in cities all over Europe use cargo bikes for more of their daily journeys. And the part of the project I was involved in focused on promoting cargo bikes using the testimonies of regular cargo bike users and the City Changer Cargo Bike project calls these regular cargo bike users local heroes. So here's one of Cambridge's local heroes. This is Mike from Mike's Bread. My brief from Cambridge County Council was to promote and celebrate the limitless potential of cargo bikes for usage amongst public, private and commercial users in Cambridge. And here's Mike showing you just how large the potential is for cargo bikes in Cambridge and beyond. On a personal note, I was absolutely delighted to be involved in this project due to my background. So I'm a lifelong Cambridge resident and committed everyday cyclist for environmental reasons. But once I had 2 children, I found I became car dependent. So getting around Cambridge with one child was absolutely fine with a standard bike and a child bike seat. But once my second baby was born, I was stumped really. I couldn't put a baby on a standard bicycle, and I was never quite bold enough once she was 1 to have one child on a seat around the handlebars and the second child behind me. So inspired by our Dutch neighbours, we purchased a cargo bike, and we've never looked back. We use it nearly every day. And since our cargo bike has changed our life for the better, I'm always really keen to spread the word about their benefits. So here are the deliverables requested by Cambridgeshire County Council. That we were required to celebrate and promote cargo bikes visually through films and photos, and also through the written word. The project scope, it covered cargo bikes for businesses and also cargo bikes for families. And you can see the output from the project at camcycle.org.uk/videos and camcycle.org.uk/cargo bikes. And you can also search the hashtag love cargo bikes on social media. I'm going to focus on the videos we produced today, as they were the main deliverables of the project. We produced 15 story videos, each one focusing on the testimony of a single local hero. And then we also produced 3 montage videos for total newcomers to cargo cycling. So these montages combined 3 or 4 of the local hero testimonies with a narrated introduction to cargo cycling and some words from local councillors in support of cargo bikes. We chose videos for cargo promotion because they're a great format for illustrating what is possible. So as the saying goes, you have to see it to believe it. For those not familiar with cargo boats, we felt these videos would hopefully show people like themselves going about their daily business, but using cargo bikes, not cars or vans, and benefiting from this choice. For example, a video might show a cargo bike sweeping past queuing traffic in a cycle lane. I feel the video format also really conveys emotion very well, which can help to build a positive image of cargo cycling. And lastly, by filming the beautiful scenery in Cambridge, we're also hopefully encouraging people to try a bike for their daily journeys. So here are some of our local heroes from Cambridgeshire. These ones are business bike users. In the project, we wanted to showcase a range of uses and bike types. So here we've got a delivery bike, a tradesperson on a bike, a kiosk bike, a store bike, and a cycle logistics bike. There are bikes with 2, 3, and 4 wheels, and they're both electric and non-electric. And here are some family cargo bike heroes. We took a fairly broad definition of family cargo bike for the project. So we've included trailers, mid-tails, long-tails, tandems, and triplets. And just as with the business bikes, we have electric and non-electric and 2 or 3 wheels. And we also wanted to show a large range of ages of children using them. So in these photos, we've got baby and also a couple of 6-year-olds. Actually, there were also older children up to 8 or 9 in cargo bikes. To produce the videos, we mostly used low-cost, readily available and easily accessible technology. So smartphones to take static shots, smartphones and a wireless mic to record audio. Then we edited the videos in iMovie, and we used royalty-free music from Upbeat. We also really benefited from Cambridge County Council's GoPro to take moving shots, and we mounted that on my cargo bike to make that possible. So I thought it'd be good to show you a clip from one of the montage videos we produced, so you can get an idea of what we created. So relax for a bit as I turn this on. I'm not going to play the whole thing because it's 5 minutes long, so I'll play about 3 minutes.
Cargo bikes for businesses are a frequent sight in Cambridge. Businesses use them instead of cars or vans to beat the congestion, and so that they can park or carry out deliveries more easily. They also demonstrate a commitment to sustainability.
Cargo bikes are cycles that have been specially designed to carry loads, sometimes as much as a small van. They can have 2 wheels, 3 wheels, or even 4 wheels. They can come with or without electric assistance to make them easier to pedal. There is a wide range of designs and they're used to transport a variety of goods. Businesses in Cambridge use them to deliver food, wine, flowers, laundry and parcels, among other goods. There are also local tradespeople that use them to go about their work, and there are kiosk bikes for selling refreshments. Hi, I'm James from Thorn Wines. We do online retail and wine wholesale throughout Cambridgeshire and East Anglia. We work a lot with restaurants in Cambridge, which means we need to get in and out of town nice and quickly and easily. We use a cargo bike to do that. It makes our life extremely easy when it comes to peak times, especially when we're traveling through the city trying to beat the traffic. We can park right outside the venues that we deliver to with a cargo bike. We don't need to worry about finding parking, putting ourselves on a double yellow line. We've used our cargo bike a lot over the past few years, and it makes our life really easy.
So I'm going to stop the video there because we haven't got time to watch all of it. But if you'd like to see more of them, they're at camcycle.org.uk/videos. Whoops, sorry, stop that. I'm trying to get back to the right screen. So I hope you enjoyed getting a sense of what we created. What did we learn from our local heroes about why they like using their cargo bikes? Nearly everyone volunteered the reasons we expected to hear. So cargo bikes give you a guaranteed and often shorter journey time. Parking is much easier when you're making a delivery or, for example, doing the school run, and they're much better for the environment. But 2 things that several of our users said really stood out for me. Many of our business bike users talked about the value of the advertising space on their bikes, and more than that, they said just how approachable and accessible cargo bike businesses are to passers-by. And I can attest to this because I spent several days cycling around with bike-based businesses, and the riders were really frequently stopped by passers-by to inquire about their services and goods. And I just can't imagine that happening if you were driving a white van. Then from the family side, lots of parents talked about interactions. It's really, really easy to communicate with children when they're in a cargo bike right in front of you, much easier than when they're behind you in a car. And the riders also valued the interactions between children seated in the bike. So for example, here, 6-year-old Annie is doing an absolutely fantastic job at interacting with baby Max to make their journey back home very smooth. So she's busy singing to Max and waving some toys at her. I learned an awful lot about producing videos during internship. I had no prior experience before I started with CamCycle. I've listed quite a few points in this slide about things I learned, but I thought I'd just mention 2 in particular. The GoPro was an absolutely fabulous time saver. If you're taking static shots of bikes, the bike you're filming goes past in a few seconds, so you need an awful lot of them to produce a video. But with the GoPro, you can move alongside the bike and take much longer shots, and it's a really good shortcut to producing a sort of story video. The other thing was that the best shots that we took were ones where the riders and the passengers were expressing emotion. And my 8-year-old son actually filmed the best shot in the whole project. And he did this by holding my smartphone as he rode along in the box of my cargo bike. And the child we were filming, who he knew, really responded to his presence and laughed and waved and smiled the whole time. The GoPro mounted on the side of the bike really didn't create the same response. So the outcomes of the project, we can't really measure increases in cargo bike uptake in Cambridge, but we've already had 2,000 views of the different videos on the CamCycle YouTube site, And we've also increased traffic and subscribers to the site, which is really beneficial for CamCycle's other campaigns. So I'd like to let you know that CamCycle is hiring. So please spread the word about their 2022 paid internship and encourage people to apply. I thought I'd finish by saying I really enjoyed every minute of my internship, found the staff team really supportive, learned an enormous amount, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work in the same area now my internship has finished. And I'll leave you with some more photos of our local cargo bike heroes, showing their appreciation for their cargo bikes by participating in our social media campaign. So if you love cargo bikes too, please join in by posting your photo on social media using the hashtag #LoveCargoBikes.
Thank you, Sarah. We've had a change of host now. Sally's had to leave, so it's Roxeanne here, and it's just a coincidence that I'm also from CamCycle. We didn't plan it that way, but of course I'm so proud of Sarah and this amazing project that she has delivered, and the great buzz that we've had around cargo bikes, not just on YouTube, but in the media as well. Sarah, I shall open the floor for you for questions.
Okay.
Who's got a question for Sarah? Have I got any hands up or anything in the chat? Yes, this is a CamCycle takeover. We tend to be like that.
You need to change screen, Roxeanne, because we're still looking at the...
Excellent. Sarah can stop sharing the screen.
Sorry, thanks.
Sorry about that. That better?
Excellent. Well, Sarah, I'd like to start with a question. Following this internship, what's next for you? How do you plan to help continue the promotion of cargo bikes?
I'm hoping to continue as a freelancer, doing more work making cargo bike videos. So I really, really enjoyed learning how to use the video format as part of my presentation. And yeah, so I'm open for offers of freelance work, and I have some in the pipeline as well.
Nice little pitch there. Ruth, you've got your hand up. What's your question?
Hi, fabulous presentation. Thank you very much. How do they manage in pedestrianised areas where cycling has been banned? Are they allowed because they're four wheels and slow, or is it an issue?
So there are very few areas in the centre of Cambridge where bikes are banned. So the city centre used to be restricted to bikes, but thanks to CamCycle's efforts, most of the city centre has been reopened for cycling. I believe you can just wheel a cargo bike across very small stretches which are still totally pedestrianised, but I can't say that for certain because I've not seen them having to do it. So you can cycle through a lot of the city centre. I think in one of my shots there was the cargo bike being pushed down Rose Crescent. That's a very short street where cycling is banned, and it's absolutely fine just to wheel them for short distances.
Thank you. And the other question quickly was one-way streets. Are your one-way streets bi-directional for cycling?
Yes, and that's again thanks to CamCycle's efforts over the years.
Thank you.
Beth, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a question, sort of a bit of an open question, a sort of statement, I suppose. I'm getting increasingly irritated by Grant Shapps and his constant plugging of all the grants and subsidies that the government are giving for electric vehicles. And at every opportunity, I respond to him on Twitter and say, what about e-bikes? What about e-cargo bikes? And I just wondered if, now I know there have been individual little grants that councils and companies can apply for, like through the Energy Saving Trust and things like that, but they seem to be quite small and quite limited. And I just wondered if there's any kind of bigger campaign or anything that we could collectively do to really put the pressure on government to subsidise e-cargo bikes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that e-cargo bikes are absolutely game-changing. So I myself upgraded from a standard bike to an electric cargo bike, and the difference, I now have a car replacement to drive rather than something that could only go for short distances. As for the grants, I don't know anything other than the e-cargo bike grant fund. Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, well, I've seen various things. I think it's kind of administered through the Energy Saving Trust, and I know there was something. Was it last year or the year before, where a number of councils got some grants, and there's been some things where individual companies can apply for like a match funding for e-cargo bikes. but I feel like there needs to be a broader thing, like a, you know, council VAT for them, or any individual can get a subsidy to the same tune as for an electric car, because we're talking thousands of pounds that the government are willing to give people to buy an electric vehicle, but that vehicle doesn't seem to apply to bikes or cycles. So, and I just think that that's so wrong, really.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I don't know how to make the change happen, but I completely agree with you.
Perhaps, Sarah, you could elaborate on some of the people you spoke to who were participating in those local grant programs, just to show how it perhaps was working for them. I'm thinking Neil, for example. I'll let you elaborate, but we can see that giving people incentives or trials does lead to behaviour change.
You mean Neil at Cambridge Fruit Company? Yeah, so in Cambridge, we have a try before you buy scheme running at the minute. And so for a very, very low cost, I think something like £7.50 a week, a business can try, or a family can try a cargo bike for a long period to see how it fits into their lifestyle. So this is fantastic for Cambridge, because I think you really do need to try a bike for 6 weeks or so to see how it fits, and then to get the confidence to spend that extra money. And Roxanne, you're going to have to update me on Neil's progress with his bike, but we sent him in the direction of Outspoken Cycles to try the bike out. And do you know what happened next? I'm hoping.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't be giving away business secrets. I'll just say it went very well. Yeah. Maybe we'll have to bring him in and he can share his progress. Yeah. I'm just seeing if we've got any other questions in the chat. Bear with me because it's bumped along quite quickly. Ruth has asked a question about cam cycles properly funded. Ruth, do you mean in general, or do you mean for this cargo bike project?
Sorry, I just mean, are you an organisation that is funded as opposed to those of us who are doing everything for nothing?
We're funded. Sorry. I'm an employed staff member, one of 4 permanent staff members, as well as our funded internship scheme. So
out of interest, I don't know if it's of interest to the rest of the group, how is it that Cambridge has got a funded group and the rest of us are banging on our heads on the wall for free?
I don't want to take over Sarah's talk, so I'll let Sarah finish. We'll have questions, and I'm very happy to elaborate Sarah. On that later or another time. I've definitely given a talk for Ideas with Beers before about how CamCycle came to be in this position. I'll see if I can find the link as well. I'm so sorry, it's Llinos?
That's fine. I kind of get used to people going, oh, but it's fine. I just had a question about e-cargo bikes and just some interviews and some other work that we've done, and not as part of Transas, but did you experience any problems with people talking about sort of parking and secure parking for them? Because I know I've done some interviews with people in Manchester, and some people talked about cargo bikes and using them there, and security being a massive issue, and where they could have them in their homes. So wondering if that was something that kind of came up, and if you
absolutely. We didn't quite get to the end of the cargo bikes for business video, but near the end of that, there's a shot when one of our local councillors stands on a street, and there are three or four cargo bikes stretched out behind him, parked on the pavement, because the local residents really want to use cargo bikes, really need to use them, but they just, in a Victorian mid-terrace house, they can't get them through to a back garden, and they haven't got front garden space to park them in. So they're lucky, well, maybe not lucky, they've managed to squeeze them onto their street with enough space, on their pavement with enough space for people to go by. But I do know there are an awful lot of people who just simply, at the minute, can't own one because there is nowhere to park them. I would love to see some schemes where we can suspend some parking bays and build suitable parking for cargo bikes. I think that would be game-changing for a lot of residents, particularly in the older streets in Cambridge. Then talking about parking when you're out and about, I think there are sort of two halves to this. So a cargo bike it's certainly really easy to just park it for a few minutes to unload something, but there is certainly pressure on, or it certainly can be harder to find somewhere to lock one securely, particularly if you feel you would like to lock it to a Sheffield stand. I lock my cargo bike to itself and feel that is sufficient, but I know that lots of people don't, and some better provision for cargo bike parking would be welcome. There are some nice designs, like a ring sunk into the ground that you can put a chain round, is absolutely great because it's also folded out of the way when no one's using it. Sheffield stands need to be quite widely spaced for cargo bikes, especially for three-wheelers, and that can be problematic.
Darren also asked about secure cargo bike parking, but Darren, I'm hoping that's answered your question. And I'll just add that Cambridge cycle parking standards are being updated, and they will absolutely be including requirements for cargo bike parking. And we see developers now almost voluntarily doing 5% to 10% non-standard cycle parking because they know they need it in Cambridge.
It's been brilliant to see cargo bike parking appearing at the stations. That's really, really helpful. Because if you want to go on a day trip, you really want to know your cargo bike's securely locked.
Sarah, we have a question from Chris Knight in the chat asking, how much planning did you do before filming the videos? And did you just plan all the shots, or did you work out roughly who you wanted and then just turned up with cameras and rolled with it? And then how much did you plan that actually worked out, I suppose?
So yeah, we definitely did a lot of planning. We talked to individuals. Some of the individuals we did just meet on the street, but we did talk to people and check they were happy to be filmed before we went ahead and then make a filming plan. It took about half a day to take enough film to make a 3-minute video. And we did very much plan the shots that we wanted. So we would interview a cargo bike user and then check that the footage that we were taking would illustrate what they were saying. So for example, when people talked about being able to cycle past a modal filter, we'd make sure that we took a shot of them cycling through a modal filter. If they talked about the ease of, I don't know, pulling up outside a shop and unloading a delivery, we'd make sure that we figured that in. I had one user who uses a long tail who talked about it being easy to squeeze his bike through the narrow gates on the way to his workplace. So we made sure we filmed that. So yeah, to produce a good video, we did do some planning, but that we also found that there were some spontaneous shots we took that were really, really nice, and they got included too.
And Sarah, could you just mention the importance of getting consent forms and things like that?
Yes, absolutely. So I think there are two halves to this. We were very careful when filming children to get consent to include their images. So to get and we that also meant checking kind of the backs of shots. We did a lot of filming around schools and had to be quite careful who was included in the back of shots by accident. So we checked our footage very carefully. In theory, it's legal in the UK to film from a public place and then use that footage, but we weren't 100% comfortable with people being identifiable if they hadn't agreed to take part. So all in all, we went for an opt-in model rather than an assuming that people were happy to be filmed model.
Sarah, there's also been some discussion about prices of cargo bikes. Wookie, also from CamCycle, has put some answers in the chat, but do you want to talk about, the prices of some of the bikes that you were showing?
Yeah, so for example, a 2-wheeler electric family cargo bike would set you back about £4,500, which is really quite a lot. I would love to see some subsidies for buying these because I think that kind of machine is a true car replacement, and it would be great to see it treated as such. Then I think a non-electric 2-wheeler would cost you about £2,000, and then maybe a triplet could cost you, I don't know, maybe £1,500 to £2,000. So not inconsiderable sums. We did feel, as part of the project, one of the deliverables was a newsletter for schools and families, for schools and nurseries. And in that leaflet, we also, to be more inclusive, made sure that we featured some of the much lower cost options that can be used for family cargo cycling. So, for example, a trailer bike is a sort of single wheel attachment that fits to an adult bike, or a follow me can be used to couple a child's bike to a regular adult cycle. These are much cheaper options. They're about £300 new or even less secondhand. So we've included those too. And I've forgotten as well, we made sure we included trailers, because cycle trailers are a much cheaper option than a classic cargo box bike. And they also are a great option in terms of flexibility, because you can attach and detach them from your adult cycle. So you have both a family cycle and a regular bike to use, which is not the case with a box bike.
Thank you, Sarah. So Neil's been waiting very patiently, but Neil is also our wonderful expert on cycle parking. So Neil, you're going to have the last question before we head over to Ruth for the last word. So Neil, it better be a good one.
So it was really what sort of insight have you got into the shift, sort of delivery sort of shift from traditional vans to cargo bikes, either now or predicted in Cambridge, obviously?
I don't have any particular numbers, but I think there's very much a sense that we're in the decade of the cargo bike. Our local Zedify depot does a roaring trade. They've got contracts with FedEx to deliver parcels. They're kept extremely busy with contracts with Freddy's Flowers and as well as lots of independent local shops like the Cambridge Cheese Company. I think, sorry, I've slightly forgotten exactly what the question is. Did you say what shifts are we seeing? I was interested from Llinos's presentation to hear about the increase in light goods vehicles. So I personally feel there's a large amount of scope to transfer deliveries from light goods vehicles to cargo bikes, particularly because light goods vehicles are often not full at all as they drive around. And this kind of setup where you have a local micro hub to which parcels delivered on the outskirts of the city, and then they're redistributed by cargo bike, and the cargo bike riders then also pick up items to go back to the hub for onward distribution by road, is game changing. It'd be really exciting to see that rolled out much more widely across the UK, and to see local councils supporting the development of micro hubs in cities. I think that would make our streets much more hospitable. I was interested in what Llinos said about the streets possibly not feeling quieter because there is this increase in larger vehicles, and that I think has been my experience in Cambridge recently. The delivery vans also are often blocking cycle paths. They're often stopping and starting, so it can make cycling around a little bit fraught with children. I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you everyone for your great questions. I hope we got through them all. But I do believe it is now time for Ruth to give us the last word. I'll just say thanks for having me. I've jumped in at the last minute and winged it, so I hope I did it properly. But Ruth, I shall let you close the session. Thanks, Sarah. To you, Ruth.
Very well done, Roxanne. You do it beautifully, with a beaming smile as always. Thank you. I was just going to say, for anyone who's interested and maybe on Facebook, there's an excellent Facebook page called Family Cycling UK. They also have a Twitter feed with the wonderful Ruth McQueen, and huge discussions about cargo bikes going on there, and lots of help. And it's phenomenal, really, because living in the London silo where it's really quite difficult, it's great to hear outside, further up country, how the sort of cargo bikes people are using, with kiddies on the front, on the back, anywhere. It is quite amazing. And there's the most extraordinary child bike I've seen in Chiswick, where it's almost like having a pushchair attached to the bike. So the mum is cycling it, and then there is literally, and she's holding the handles as if she's on a McLaren, and the kid is in the thing in front. So do have a look at Family Cycling UK, Ruth McQueen, and also Cycle Sprog, I think it was, for the Putin thing, but also for the family bikes. Lots of information. Have a lovely week, and we'll see you all post-election. So get your voting done on Thursday and vote for people who will vote for cycling. Thank you for coming.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. All right. I hope you're feeling better, Claire.
Hi.
Nice first session, Roxanne.
Yeah, very good.
Good one.
I'm literally off in 2 minutes to do another one. So
oh, very good. It is funny at the end. So someone has to decide: are we going to have a debrief, or is somebody has to kind of close it down? So whoever's leading, I don't know how to close it down, but someone has to turn the recording off. Although I am, I think.
that's me. Stop.
Okay. But it's always quite nice